Welcome back for part 2 of episode 15 and my conversation with my friend, Paul Chepikian. I apologize for the delay in between these episodes. Once again, life has twists and turns we have no control over, reminding me to slow down and take care of myself. Now back into better health, let's get back into some amazing stories. In part 2, Paul reveals some tough blows he has had to deal with in his life. Suicide is not an easy topic, but unfortunately, one that has touched many lives. If you know of anyone who has dealt with suicide in their life, or if you yourself have become a survivor, please share and comment below. We just never know if by chance we can help one person. It will not be the only topic in this second portion of our conversation. Paul is also a writer, an actor, an editor, and I can't wait for you to hear what else he has to tell us. Thank you for joining us. Let's get back into it. So now, family dynamics can be difficult in some ways, but families expand, you get spouses, you get in-laws, and certain dynamics definitely test our resolve, bringing us to a very tragic time in your life. And it's a topic that's difficult to discuss and unimaginable to talk about, I'm sure. But you use the phrase that you are a dual survivor of suicide. And do you feel comfortable talking about that? Because that's amazing to me.
I do. I've worked really hard to make peace with it all.
Yeah.
And then, and I'll explain what happened.
Okay.
But after it happened, I didn't want to. There's a lot of shame associated with suicide, and there shouldn't be, in my opinion. And so and part of the problem with, just to set up, my wife, Sue, took her own life. And about a year before her father took his own life. So in 1 year, I was dealing with my father-in-law's suicide and my wife's suicide. And I felt like part of the issue for my wife was she didn't want to talk about her father, about the suicide. And I think it took a big toll on her. And it took a big toll on our marriage and our relationship.
Yeah.
I was always open to it. I was encouraging her to get help. I was encouraging her to talk to friends, if she was having trouble talking to me, etc.
Right.
So when it happened again, when Sue took her own life, I was like, I am not going to keep this a secret. I am not going to sweep this under the rug. I am going to it got silly because they got me into market, and somebody would say, "How you doing today?" I said, "I'm pretty good. My wife killed herself." It was like I'm being silly, but I'm not.
Yeah.
It was just like I'm not going to keep it a secret because I saw what it did to my wife,
Right.
Sue.
Right. Wow.
It was just like, oh God, this is just. We need to talk about this, and I would tell her that, and without getting into the whole thing of it.
No. It's the survival part that I'm more interested.
Well, for me, so it was now part of my life.
Yeah.
And it actually, in a bizarre way, it came in handy years and years and years later when I was in crisis response, because we do get a lot of suicide calls.
Wow.
And that's a very broad term. We don't, but it became sort of like people would be dispatched to be like, oh, we had a suicide call, get Chepikian.
Oh, man.
But I was okay with it.
Okay.
A lot of people like, what? God, I don't want to talk about it. And I was like, no, I'm good with it. I've made peace with it. It is part of my life. It's a chapter in my life. It will always be with me. And so one time a friend asked, well, I made peace with it because I just said, okay, to me, suicide is an illness. Sometimes we can diagnose an illness and we can treat the illness and you get better.
Right.
Sometimes we can never diagnose the illness and it kills you. Sometimes you can diagnose the illness, you treat the illness, and it still can kill you. So that's how I made peace with it. My wife had an illness, however you want to define it. And it took her,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
That's it. And I did
Right.
everything I could to get her help. And
Sure.
she refused it. She did.
Yeah.
She blatantly refused it. And in the end, had I not done that, I think I would have taken it a lot harder.
Right.
But I know that I did everything in my power to help her. So that made me, I don't think feel better, but that helped me cope and survive. And so the way I deal with it now is when people ask me, so I use it, I have a scar on my arm here, and you can't really see it, but I have this scar. And people say, what's it like, suicide? I said, it's like this scar.
Interesting.
Every now, and as far as the suicide, I said, every now and then I see that scar. Occasionally I see it, and I think of how painful it was when I got it.
Right.
Most of the time, I'm not aware of it. But the scar is always there.
Yes.
The scar is always going to be there.
Yeah.
So that's what suicide is to me. It's a scar that I live with. And occasionally I'm reminded of how I got the scar. And that's not easy.
No.
But most of the time I'm not aware of the scar. And in fairness to others, because I went through group counseling and stuff, and in my group, I had lost a spouse. Somebody there who's there had lost a son. Somebody there had lost a sister. So it varies how I can't imagine losing a child to suicide.
No.
You know,
No.
I don't have to imagine what it's like to lose a spouse to suicide because I experienced it.
Right.
I don't know what it's like to lose a sibling because I didn't. So, and the dynamics I think are different.
For sure.
So,
for sure. And if you
it took a while.
if you get one of these calls then to go out and help a survivor of or the witness of what happened, do you try to give them the idea of going to get counseling because it's not up to you to figure out how this person is going to react. So do you have a list of things that you go over with this person? Is it more just this might help if you go this way or that way?
Well, we definitely are not diagnosing. We're not trained to do that. But we certainly have instincts and we have access. If we're really concerned about somebody, we can make a call and say, you should probably talk to this person. Usually it's just a matter of, as I said earlier, we call it in crisis response, it's called sacred silence.
Oh.
We're just there.
Wow.
You know, because you're going to hear a mother say, how could God do this?
Right.
I'm so mad at God. And I remember one time I was working with someone who was basically a newbie, and he was supposed to be with me. They come on calls just to observe. You're supposed to just observe.
Okay.
You know, most of the time we're all just observing. And when the woman said, I'm so mad at God right now, and this guy who's not supposed to say a word says, well, God can handle anything. So, and I just like, the look on my face was like, if she doesn't punch you, I will. You know, it's because you don't know how that person will react, but don't know. So, and I had to report that to my superiors and say, he's offering advice.
Yeah.
We have lists, we have pamphlets, blah, blah, blah.
Okay,
but at that moment is not the time or the place.
No.
You know, I'm in the living room sitting with the mother, and the son is still in the bedroom because the coroner hasn't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
It's not the time to discuss treatment.
No.
It's hard. I know it's hard, but
Yeah.
that's what it is. No, you're not. If they say, why isn't the coroner here yet? I can answer that question in a delicate way. It says, what am I going to do what will they do with Jim? I can say, well, the coroner's going to take him, and then the mortuary. So I can give that advice.
Yes.
But really, for me to say, now, mind you, this is weird for me personally. I know on some level, I don't know. I can relate to what they're going through because I've experienced it.
Yes.
So I know this is weird, but psychically in my mind, I'm trying to let these people know, just in my mind, I know it seems hopeless right now.
Yeah.
but I can assure you it gets better because I'm living proof. So I try to convey that, the energy,
Ah,
but I can't say it because if I said that, I wouldn't have blamed them if they picked up a dish and broke it over my head.
gosh, I would not have ever have thought of that, that you would have to keep that in your brain because I'm sure most people would go, listen, I've been there and trust me, but you can't do that. That
No.
makes so much more sense when you say it that way. I,
And
this,
honestly, I mean, how dare you would be the answer.
yeah,
In
right,
this
right.
moment, my son is still in
Yeah,
the other room. How dare you tell me it's going to get better?
yeah.
Because I know that when I went through it, the last thing on my mind was it's going to get better. You know what I
No,
mean?
no, yeah,
It's like
yeah.
I thought my world was ended.
Right,
So,
right.
and these are things you learn in taking the course when they're training you, but they're also you're bringing yourself to a lot of this.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you know,
I was just going to say, and how amazing for you to continue to take these calls and for
yeah,
you to be all right with going, that's right. I've been there and not instead of just for me would have been trigger right away, take me right back to that situation and bring up all these horrible thoughts. But here you are taking the time, knowing you have the experience, and just trying to help others move forward. I love it. You're amazing.
no,
Thank you for
thank
doing
you,
that.
kiddo. If I can share with you the first call out I had for
Please.
CRT, the first one, not the one the double night or
Okay.
whatever. Um, when I did the two people in one night, I had already experienced, which is why they didn't send anybody with me. Normally, CRT doesn't like to send one person. It's always
Right.
best to have two.
Okay.
But that night where those gentlemen were killed, I had already experienced. So they sent me, but my first call out ever, and they said, Paul, you really can't take calls by yourself, but we really don't have anybody. And that's when they asked me, are you good doing this on your own? And I was like, yeah, because they knew my background. So my first call ever with crisis response is a suicide in the backyard with a weapon. And
Ah,
my father-in-law killed himself in the backyard with a weapon, with a shotgun. And I
oh my
remember
gosh.
when I got that call, and I was like, my first instinct is to say, yes, I signed up for this. I'm going to go. And on my drive over, and I used to put on classical music when I was going to a call because it
Yeah.
relaxed me and put me in this state of mind. And so on the way over, I thought, oh, universe, you are fickle. Oh, what are you doing to me? Is this a test? My
Yeah.
first call is suicide in the backyard with a weapon, just like your father-in-law, Paul. And he had used a service revolver, which is very common, sadly. But
Yeah.
on my way over, I was thinking, am I going to do okay with this? How am I going to handle it? And I stopped. It was Coldwater and Ventura Boulevard. And I stopped. And to my right, the sun was setting in the west. And there was a woman on the sidewalk, and she had a stroller. And she took her baby out. And she had this beautiful long hair. She took her baby out. And she held her baby up like this and making faces. And it was all backlit. I'm getting very cinematic. That's who I am.
I'm
But
getting tingles, so go ahead.
oh, she was all backlit by the setting sun, and her hair was like, and she was holding her baby up. And I remember thinking, this is life.
Yeah.
Paul, this is life. There is the beginning of life.
Mhm.
And I'm driving to a house which has an older gentleman in the backyard
Yeah.
who's killed himself, who's dead. And I just went, yeah, full circle,
Yeah. Full
you know?
circle. Right.
And I just thought, you got this, you
Yeah.
got this. And it did. I mean, it's not like it's a cakewalk, but
No.
I was good. I felt good. And I introduced myself to the police officers. There's a certain protocol we
Okay.
have to go through. And I remember thinking very consciously, because I was talking to the son, the father, the gentleman who killed himself, his son was there with mom. And I had him in the living room. And I was a little concerned about the son because he was showing some aggression. not judgment, but
No.
an observation. And I went over to the police officer. I said, "Could I talk to you for a minute?" And we went off. I said, "Are there any weapons in the house?" And he said,
Good call.
"Good thinking." He said, "We already confiscated them." I said, "Okay, that's what I want to know." Again, these are emotions running high,
Right.
and you don't know what somebody can do. But it showed me that, okay, you're thinking, you got this. You're not dwelling on the suicide.
Right.
You're thinking about the son. You're thinking about the mother. And I stayed with her. I was going to say earlier, Dad, Precious' response had a very distinct policy of you don't touch or hold the people. And we were all like, oh, when you have a woman collapse in your arms, and so it was an unofficial thing that do what you think you need to do.
Yeah.
We'll deal with the consequences.
Right.
But there was one Hasidic Jewish person was in the house, and the husband, and there was a rabbi there, and the rabbis apparently don't console the victims. They're not allowed to touch. It's all and she just came up to me and she just said, "Can I hug you?" What do you say?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, it's not allowed.
Yeah.
And I understand the litigation issue and blah, blah, blah. But there are times in life where you put that shit aside, you deal on the emotional level.
That's right.
So
that's right. Oh,
yeah, bring it in.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Sometimes that physical touch is more helpful than anything else.
Exactly.
Just like when you were holding Carlos's hand, same thing. It's just
oh, absolutely. That was the bond. Yeah, that was the bond, and just him resting when we finally got him over. Him resting his head on my shoulder, and I'm resting my head against his head, and we're holding hands. Yeah.
Yeah. Very positive, very healing. Oh my gosh.
In my opinion, for both of us.
Yes, that's right. I can see how, and bless you for 60 different things, but there has got to be a somewhat of a depletion of energy, but at the same time, when you're processing it and you're getting through it, there's this build of amazing energy that just puts another layer of hope and positive thinking, keeping you in that moment of you are helping another individual. Think about this, be proud of this, and make sure you understand that you are helping someone. But I'm sure you don't sit there and think, "Oh, well, I really did a good job today, Paul. Good job."
No.
The idea, though, that you don't even have to say anything. It's just that depletion of energy to help get that person locked on. And then it's just the amazing turnaround of energy that is so fulfilling and so empowering for both of you. I think you're amazing.
Oh, thanks. I have to thank you for saying that, because I tend to dismiss it. And I go to the well of, oh, what are you doing? What's your life? What have you done?
Right.
Because it seems, and it shouldn't, it seems selfish or arrogant to think, no, Paul, you did this and you did that and you were there, and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to think that and embrace it.
Well, and the thing too, I think, is the idea of, and I think you had mentioned this, that we're not supposed to talk about ourselves and we're not supposed to promote ourselves. And wherever that started, did that start for you in childhood, teenage years, kind of thing? When did that start happening to you?
It's a very clear answer to that. My brother and I, you asked earlier, are similar with respect to our talents. My father was a gifted artist. My brother was a gifted artist. Now I'm a gifted artist. My brother had learning issues, and he was, as I mentioned, 5 years older than me. And initially, when we moved here, my mom would say things like, "Oh, now," when her friend would come over, she'd say, "Paul, now don't outshine your brother, okay? You're the smart. Just don't outshine your brother. Let him have." And that became a mantra for me. Don't outshine you know.
Yeah. Yes.
And so I've learned now that talking about yourself doesn't mean you're arrogant or you're conceited or you're egotistical. If you do it in a healthy way, a
Yeah.
healthy and constructive way, there's nothing wrong with it. Be
No.
proud,
Right.
and that applies to my writing and everything. I've been, this is therapy. You should charge me. Um,
Me too. For me, we'll charge each other. That's all
yeah, there
good.
we go. It's offsetting.
There you go.
Um, you know, you can talk about your work. You
Mm-hmm.
can talk about, like I've been sort of more than ever, the thing with Carlos. I have been sharing that a little bit more with people, where normally it just would go right into the
Yeah.
memory bank.
Right.
But I'm like, no, that's pretty cool and that's pretty helpful, and you should be proud of that, etc.
Yeah.
Um, which is why it's nice, and it doesn't happen often, but when I get acknowledged.
Yes.
Like, I think I sent you the copies of the
Yes.
letters, like the
Yes.
letter from the Pasadena chief of police, acknowledging what I did.
Yes.
Oftentimes, law enforcement and firefighting and stuff, it's their job and they don't really like other people.
Stepping in.
And yeah, and they'll dismiss you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas on rare occasions, as you saw, somebody will say, "Can I have your name?"
Yeah.
And they will, like in that case in Pasadena, the police officer apparently got in touch with the chief and said, "The civilian, et cetera, and we should acknowledge his contribution." So that was
Oh,
really nice.
very
But
nice.
it's not usually what happens.
Yeah.
You do what you do, and then that's when you learn that that's what you do. It's
Mm-hmm.
not why you do it.
Yeah.
There's no, you do it, and then whatever comes of it will come of it. But you should walk away with the knowledge that, like, for example, there's two people in this room who, in a way, owe you your life, which sounds weird, but they
Right.
do.
Yeah.
You help them each. They possibly, I won't say probably, but yeah, if you're choking,
You
you
only have a
know,
finite amount of time.
yeah. So you realize that that's the reward, the
Yes.
knowledge, and I think for me, as I get older, I begin to accept that more.
Right.
That it's like there's a great lyric in James Taylor's song. It says, "Say nice things about me when I'm gone." I just love that. Say nice things about me when I'm gone.
That's all I ask, man.
Yeah, it's like, that's all. So,
That's right. No,
but
that's
there's
good.
there's far too many, and they're not all very dramatic, but some are.
Yeah.
When I think back, I'm like, holy crap, Paul, you could have been hurt, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the guardian angel that you are is the guardian angel on your shoulder from whatever part of the universe that says you're going to need some help today. So I'm just going to sit on
yes,
this your shoulder today and we'll
yeah,
take it together because
I love that. I love
yeah.
that analogy, and it's true because somebody has to look out for me too. If I'm
Yeah.
doing something where I'm putting myself at risk,
Right.
well, somebody's going to be looking
Right
out for
there.
me.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
for
been
sure.
too many incidents, and I've been trying to write about it for years in
Yes.
screenplay form. It's not a
Good.
documentary, but there's a story about a guy who's a shit magnet.
It's too bad you can't put that in the title, but you know what?
I think the danger magnet works. So thank you, Tommy. Thank you for that one. Oh
Disaster.
man.
Disaster magnet.
Yeah, the disaster magnet. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God.
And so, like I said, we could have so many conversations. And, I'll just ask you right now, do you want to do a podcast called Polly Talks? Where we just sit down every day and go, here's our topic. I know you got at
you
least
know,
15 different things.
what's funny is for a time I actually considered doing like a lecture circuit on
Huh,
suicide.
right?
Not a medical background, but just as someone who experienced two in one year,
Yes.
twice, just to talk to people. And because I think a lot of people have questions,
Oh my
a lot of
gosh,
people
for
have
sure.
questions. And I get I get calls all the time from friends who'll say, "Hey, you know what? My cousin's husband, would you mind if he called you?" And
Oh,
no, not at all. That makes me feel
wow.
good. And I thought, how can I take that to the next level? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and by the way, as far as I decided, I worked crisis response for like 5 years, and then I decided, okay, I need a break,
Oh,
and I think that's
yes.
important.
For
I
sure.
think
For sure.
firefighters, law enforcement, nursing personnel,
Yeah.
you have to know when is enough to step
Mhm.
away and
That's right.
regain your strength and energy.
Yeah.
You can't get burned out on this stuff because you won't be good to anybody.
No, that's right. And
So,
you have talked about that you keep talking to every once in a while, you've said screenplay and you know, you can't write these things, but you will and you have been writing. Do you remember what the insightfulness was to start writing things down? Was it just because the experiences were so crazy that you thought, well, I'm going to write this down? Or is it just you've always been wanting to write, whether it be real life experience or fictional? What started you thinking about writing?
well, it certainly was something very relevant in my life. I can't dismiss it. I mean, there's just far too many incidents to
Right.
dismiss it. Terry always says, and you know my wife, she's so supportive and encouraging. She's my foundation. But she says something that really made me realize, yeah, I guess so. She said, whatever you do, whether it's your photography or your writing or whatever you're editing, she says, you're a storyteller.
Very
And I
true.
thought, yeah, that's that. Even when I'm just talking, I
Yeah.
love telling stories and I think I'm good at it.
Very good
Now,
at it.
you wouldn't have heard me say that years ago. I could not say I'm good at it. I was not
Oh,
allowed to. But now I'm thinking, no, damn it, you're a good storyteller and you are a good writer. And
right.
stop playing those old tapes because I did grow up. I'm sorry to say, I don't mean to make everything a mommy issue, but my mom did have issues herself.
Hmm.
And my mantra growing up, what she instilled in me growing up is what makes you think you can fill in the blank? Whatever it was. It was like,
Yes.
what makes you
Yes.
think you can do that? There's other people who can do that better.
Oh,
And I believed
brutal.
that for a long time. And
Yeah.
the truth is, yeah, there are a lot of people.
Hmm. Hmm.
So with my photography, for example, I one day I said to myself, why can't you just say you're just as good as everybody else?
So difficult sometimes, isn't it? It's
Right.
crazy.
You don't have to say you're better.
Yeah.
You certainly don't say you're the best
Yeah.
because I don't think I am, but I think I'm as good as others. And
Right.
now what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong, right? Yeah, it's
Right.
very
So
difficult to say. Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
I started writing because it was, in a way, a little bit getting out of my head and
Mm.
bring up. Now, I enjoy writing fiction. I like making things up.
Yeah.
Most of what we talked about um, is really happening, but they trigger other thoughts.
Yes. Oh, for
Like the
sure.
fact that, yeah, and that's how it works. It's the seed
Yes.
for something else.
Yes.
And also, because English was not my first language, when I moved here, I was so insecure.
Yeah.
Um, and I went out of my way to learn the language. And so even until today, when I'm texting and stuff, I spell out the words. I believe in punctuation. It's just I didn't work this hard to learn them.
Yes,
Um,
that's a great, yeah, perspective that,
yeah,
don't think about.
just just earlier, Terry and I were sitting with TV, and the woman said, "This is a historical house," and I said, "Terry, okay, this is a historic house or is it a historic?" And we researched it because
Yeah.
I want to know.
Right. You're curious.
I want to do my best to speak properly
Yeah.
and punctuate
Interesting.
properly.
Right.
Because I worked hard to learn the language.
And I was going to say too that being a witness to all the different things that you've witnessed, and I'm pretty sure you said this to me, that you have come to accept the past, the present, and the future. And we're not spring chickens anymore. And it takes time for me to get to that point, whether I can say that or not, but you have said that. And is it something that um, became important to you only to move forward? Is it something that was inspired by, if heard about it in therapy? What finally gave you the ability to say those words? I have accepted the past, present, and future.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if I've accepted the future because I'm not sure what it will be.
Yeah.
I've definitely accepted my past.
Yeah.
If I were to like just step back and go, okay, Paul, you're born in Saudi Arabia. You're born in a village, basically.
Yeah.
And only because this is the pinnacle for me in terms of a career thing. And I mean, you know this, but to go, that little boy from Saudi Arabia got cast in a Steven Spielberg movie.
Amazing.
That's quite an adventure, you know, that's
Quite.
quite a journey.
It
So
is. It is.
my past has brought me to where it was. Wrote and produced the show for Showtime and got nominated. I'm not, and I guess partly, and I always say this, I don't say these things to impress,
Right.
though they are impressive,
They are
you know,
impressive.
but I say it to inspire.
Yes.
So that if there's people out there listening, like I moved here in 1980 as a 24-year-old, inspired by a guy named Steven Spielberg. I just loved the movie, but I thought, you know, I could work with it. I thought whatever. And you know what? It didn't happen until 3 years ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So don't give up on your dreams,
There you go.
you know?
There
And
you
that
go.
is hard. I say that. And it's much harder because I have moments where I'm like just so devastated about what I haven't done. I'm, and that's you know, I focus more on what I haven't done
Yeah.
than what I've done.
Right.
So I'm trying to be better to myself about that.
Yeah. That's
That
very prevalent right now for me too, where I think if it's not now, when? I still haven't finished my book and I will finish that book. But right now, in the moment, my creativity is with learning other stories and hearing other stories, and at the same time, inspiring me to do something on my own, on just talking about myself and my experiences, because I too was brought up where, uh, not to outshine anyone because there were so many of us, but the idea that you are not supposed to bring out all these abilities and these talents and make a big thing out of it because that was a gift from God, and you just be quiet about it. You just
right,
realize that you can do it, and you don't need to sell it. You can't sell that. And you think, well, maybe I could create something and make something and sell it, and it would still be um, successful. Who knows? But again, it's that idea of stay in the background and don't project yourself
yeah,
when, maybe I could do that. And this imposter syndrome, I think, is still with the writing, but that's okay. I'll work on that too. But meanwhile, I tried this and figured who knows where it's going to go, if anywhere, but it's still something fun. And I want to say, check, I did a podcast,
yes, and
So,
like as I said this to you, I mean, it's impressive. Just to, you know, it's almost like when we know about screenwriting. The first thing, if somebody gives me a script to read, the first thing I do is tell them, "Congratulations on writing a
oh,
script."
yeah.
I mean, honestly, we know how hard it is.
So hard. Yeah.
It it may not be good,
Mhm.
but you did it.
You
You did
completed
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you can work on, hopefully, if you don't think it's good, you can improve it. Or if you think it's good, you're done.
Yeah.
But I'm like you. And I always wonder, I have a couple of friends who are only children, to their family,
Oh,
and
okay.
they seem to have a different dynamic because they're never competing with anybody. They're the
Yeah.
golden child, you
Right.
know, and
Yeah.
and most of the ones I know are successful
Okay.
because they didn't have to compete.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Mm-hmm.
my poor brother, one of the most heartbreaking things my brother ever said to me was, um, he said, "Well, at least mom thinks one of us is a success."
Oh,
you know and it just broke my heart because
that.
yeah, she was pretty relentless about success.
Yes. Yes.
You have to be successful, you have to be successful, you have to be, it was, if you're not a professional, you're nobody. So
Oh.
unless you're a lawyer or a doctor,
Mm.
engineer, you're not anything. And she had two sons who were artists.
Bless
But
them.
yeah, so my brother and I were always in a very unintentional competition.
Mm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know it was
Yes.
never intentional,
Right.
at
Right.
least not for me. I'm pretty sure it wasn't for him either, but we're both very artistic. I tried to encourage him to follow computers, because he
Mm.
was a graphic designer,
Oh.
and when the shift began to happen for graphic design, he didn't want to learn computing, and I was like,
Oh.
this is the future. And
Yeah.
so it hit hard, but he made a life for himself, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. Yeah. He figured
He
out his
did.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
Uh,
good. Well, listeners, I believe that we all have the same basic human needs, and that's to be seen, heard, and understood. And Andrew Huberman on Jay Shetty's podcast, I don't know if you ever listened to him, but On Purpose, says that these podcasts are the human narrative. It's another storytelling. It's another creative way to say, here's what happened in my life. No one else has that experience. No one else has that unique perspective. So I think any story of anyone's life is fascinating, and I appreciate you sharing a lot of yours today. And maybe this will jumpstart your memoirs. You're working on that still.
I am. I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get overwhelmed.
Yeah. Do you write down chapters? Do you kind of write down ideas in a notebook, or what status are you at with it?
I started just with a list.
Good.
you know,
Good.
remember, something as silly as landing at JFK as an 8-year-old. From Beirut, Lebanon, and having never seen an escalator in my life.
Right.
There's like a whole incident that
gosh.
happened that it's really sort of
Yes.
fun, and it's an 8-year-old perspective.
Yes.
And so I'll write the escalator story when that cop was yelling at you as you were going down the up escalator. So
Yeah.
hopefully that'll trigger as much information as I could recall.
Yes.
As we go farther back, it becomes a little more misty.
Very faded.
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
faded. Yeah, I've asked my sibling, Marcia, I had her on, and I said, you're going to have to fact check me because this is what would happen in my brain, but I don't know if it's accurate. So, yeah, it starts
Very
to mesh
true.
with other things.
It's almost like I always used to think, like, I think my memoirs, the first thing it's going to say is, to the best of my recollection.
Yes. Yes.
Because
that's right.
And at this point I'm like, wait, did I add that, or did that really happen?
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter.
No,
doesn't
it really
matter,
doesn't. Not when it's your own perspective. And if people understand that, like being with this large family, I'm sure there's 12 different perspectives that happened on that same night where something happened that I saw it as a 5-year-old, you saw it as a 10-year-old, etc. So, right.
And in a way, you're blessed you still have some references to them. Because, like, for example, I think I may have mentioned this to you before, because my father is gone now, my brother is gone now, and for all intents and purposes, my mom, though she's alive. And I said to Terry recently, I said, I've accepted the fact that there are going to be certain things about my past that I will have no clarification on.
Yeah.
The relationship between my mother and my father was never clear. Well, certainly not going to be explained now.
No. Yeah.
And there are
That's
certain
right.
things where I'm just going to have to either fill in the blanks best I can or just let it go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terry was asking me the other day, there's this picture of me on my mom's lap, sitting out on the stoop in this, it's a black and white picture, and it looks like, I thought it was Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And
Okay.
she said, no, you look older unless you, so the thing is, I will never know where that picture was taken
Oh,
or how old
right.
I
Right.
was, you know.
Nobody to ask.
'Cause,
Right.
yeah, there's no one to ask anymore. There's no one else that will know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's like, Paul, worry about the things you have to worry about.
That's right. As frustrating as it might be to
Right,
not know exactly where that was,
right. Yeah.
no one can say you're wrong. Put
Right.
it
I
that
mean,
way.
I know it's not Paris. That's sort of obvious. It's like, okay, it's definitely not the Champs-Elysees. It's some village
And,
somewhere, more
yeah.
than likely in the Middle East.
And no matter what I say, I can't convince you it's not Paris.
Exactly. So,
Oh, I love it. Well, anyone thinking of doing their memoirs, it's important to start now. I mean, I don't care if you're
yeah,
15 or you're 40 or you're 64 or you're 80. If it's stories that you want to put out there, just do it. It's
yeah,
just do it.
yeah,
It's your perspective and your unique story. And I think everyone should tell their story.
absolutely.
So maybe you'll finally feel that magical experimentation of, you know what, I'm just going to dive into this one memory that I have. And picturing you as a young child going up an escalator or down the escalator that's supposed to be going up, immediately you have a visual. And I hope you will expound on that. I know that.
Yeah, it's a memory that's etched in my brain because it was
Yeah.
such a visual memory. I'll share this with you very quickly. So as I'm doing this, what happened was, by the way, I had
Okay.
separated from my family. The
Oh,
little toddler who walks off. So I'm in a new country, not speaking a word of English, and I wander off because I see this amazing contraption. And so I start
yes.
playing on it, and I do the up and down the up and whatever. And then all of a sudden I hear like a bellowing voice, and I am walking up the down escalator, So I'm doing that, and I turn around, but I keep walking. There's what I'm assuming now was a police officer, and he's at the bottom. And it was like, when the Charlie Brown cartoons, when you would hear audio, when the adults talking, wah, 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 wah. And for all intents and purposes, I'm here, wah, 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 wah. And he's like, and I have no idea what he's saying. And I'm now walking backwards so that I don't go down. And so in my mind, I have envisioned that he was saying, now mind you, I knew 2 words of English, yes and no.
Oh,
But I really,
gosh.
it's like yes and no. So as I'm doing this, I hear, wah, 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 which I'm assuming the police officer was saying, get down here. And I'm going, so I decide I'll use one of the 2 words, no. So I just go, and I say it very proudly, no. And then he says, wah, 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 wah. And then I decide, okay, I use no, I'll use yes. And then my thinking is, he's saying, what do you think, I'm a fool? Yes! And I just kept alternating yes and no. I have no idea what he's saying, but I'm speaking English now, yes and no. Finally, it was fun to finally cut to, because I eventually did go down, and cut to this big, police officer. I think he had like the overcoat that the cops had, and he's holding my hand, and his big cop and a little 8-year-old, and he's walking away, and I'm like, which is probably another reason I chose law enforcement,
Yes.
And we're walking away, and then it was, I would imagine the next thing was the loudspeaker saying, we have a little lost boy at the Pan Am counter.
Wah, 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 wah,
Yeah.
wah.
So my mom and dad came and got me, and the cop had given me this square white box with a cellophane window, and inside was American bread and and cheese, American cheese, and a thing of milk.
Wow.
So I was like eating and drinking, white bread and American cheese. Welcome to America.
Yeah, what a day.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, I think I must have enjoyed it. It's like, yes, no, yes, no.
Whatever, dude. Yes.
Yeah. So funny.
The great story. Yeah, I love it. All right. So, listeners out there, if you are starting to write or thinking about writing, tell us where you're at. Tell us what inspires you. And if it is your life story, write down a sentence from it and just let our minds wander, because even that one sentence created a whole beautiful, amazing story. Yeah. So I hope you write that down. I'll read it, Paul, when you're done with that memoir.
I would love if you would like to read something I've written. I have recently. Look at this.
Nice. Oh gosh.
It's
organized.
I recently looked at these to see what's in there and stuff, and did something I don't often do, which is gave myself a lot of credit. I said, you say you're not a writer. Right. What is that?
Liar.
Yeah. There's probably four to six finished pieces. And then there's awesome. All these folders and it could be one sentence,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But no, I mean, as far as your listeners go, yeah, about the writing. And if it's not your life story, make it up. I mean,
have fun.
You can. I have a friend of mine who wrote A Midnight Run, which is one of my favorite movies with Charles Grodin and Robert De Niro and Joe Pantoliano.
Love that movie.
Isn't it? It's like one of the honestly, and it's so well written. And George Gallo is the writer, and he's an acquaintance. Okay. I can say he's a friend. We haven't seen each other in a while, but we stay in touch. But yeah. I once was talking to him about writing, and he goes, "You want to be a writer?" I said, "Yeah." And he threw a yellow legal pad and a pencil at me and said, "Here, write."
You're a writer.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see if you're a good writer, but here's a pad and a pencil. Write.
Yeah. Until you do it.
That's right. Exactly.
You don't know.
So anybody out there who's thinking about it, I mean, it's not just about your own life story. It could be one sentence from your life story that triggers an adventure that you're going to make up. That's going to be fantasy.
And it's so relatable. That's the thing, whether it's just the escalator, whether it's just the airport, whether it's just the officer, whether it's being a parent that lost a child in an airport. I mean, there's so many vast points about that one sentence just conjures amazing stories. And that's the fun of it, I think,
Truly
but that's the fun of these podcasts too, is that you have no idea where it's going to go. You don't know anything about an experience you had when you were 8, and what fun it is to bring it out and hear it and listen to it. And I was lost as a child at the state fair, and that immediately brings that up to my mind. And I don't know how old I was. I was less than 10. I'm sure it wasn't more than 8 at the time. And this huge state fair, and I'm looking around and I don't recognize anybody. And I, I'm starting to get nervous. And when I was finally found, and there was a wonderful person that just said, "Stay right here. They always come back. Don't keep wandering around," kind of thing. And so again, just so many stories it just brings out from one sentence,
And we all relate, where for the most part, we've all led somewhat similar lives. There are certain through lines to all our lives. Some of us had different kinds of adventures.
Yes.
But the bottom line is, like you said before, we all want to be seen. We all want to be heard. We all want to be appreciated.
Yes.
I think for me at this point in my life, and maybe for you too, is I want to remain vital. You know? And that's that's a relative term. What is vital to you is not vital to
Yeah.
someone else.
No,
So
that's right. That's right.
there's no
And it's
right or wrong.
always no. And it's interesting. I find it interesting that what is in your heart right now in this moment that you're dealing with, that you're thinking about, that you are inspired by, what you're worried about. Because it changes every moment or every time you speak to somebody.
Yeah, yeah,
It's good stuff. Yeah. Which brings up the idea of check in with someone that you haven't checked in with for a long time. I think people that keep that connectivity, that reach out just on a whim, some reason somebody pops into your head, pick up the phone, make a little text. They can answer, they don't answer, but they're it might just be that one time in their life where they're like, oh, someone is thinking about me.
yeah,
I guess it's not such a bad day. Because if you ask people and you listen, that's the other part of this is that you have to be able to listen to someone when you open that door. It can't be open the door and go, well, let me tell you all the things that happened to me today. It's got to be that give and take. And let me just sit back and listen to you for a little while and see
well, I, I'm
what's
so
happening.
glad you say that because um, my therapist a couple of weeks ago, we had this great conversation, and I was telling her about where I am in life at this point and what I'm looking for and blah, blah, blah. But she said something that made so much sense, and it has not left my mindset. And I'm very, very serious about this. She said, because of some of the people in my life, I realized, you know, if you're spending time with people and in that entire time they never ask about you, and she
So
said,
true.
you're looking for in your life, you're looking for dialogue, not monologue.
Oh my gosh.
I loved it.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
perfect. And I have, for the last few, since she said that, I've tried
Mm-hmm.
because I realize that's what it's about. And the analogy I've always used, even before she said that, is for me, friendships, relationships should be like a really good tennis match. It
Oh,
should be a volley back and forth,
right.
you know?
Right.
And
Yes.
because I used to play tennis, if I keep serving and you can't return the ball, it's really not fun.
No.
And if you keep serving and I can't return the ball, it's not fun. So
Yes.
I want to be able to
Yeah.
serve the ball. I want you to return it, and I'm going to hit it back, and you're going to hit it back. And then eventually, yes, one of us is going to. And that's not
Mm-hmm.
to say there aren't moments in our lives where I'm talking to my friend Janice, and I realize she's somewhere where I need to listen more than talk.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
fine. But that shouldn't be the relationship,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I guess crisis response of sacred silence. Yes, I will listen. In that situation, completely appropriate that all I do is listen.
Huge.
But
Yeah.
if I have a friend who is this constant me, it's just not healthy.
Mm-mm.
Uh,
No.
and,
No.
don't use that old joke, enough about me, what do you think of me? Because that's a cop out, stop,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. That's
Sincerely
right.
ask me about me, you
Yeah.
know. So when she
Yeah.
said that, you're looking for a dialogue, not a monologue, I was like, oh, yes, that's
Very
exactly
powerful.
very
Very
powerful for
powerful.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's an important part of friendship. I think that's it's so necessary that you have someone that will relate with you, laugh with you, cry with you, but listen to you because it's a witness to your life, and
yeah.
it's it's wonderful to create that. And you and Terry have inspired so many people
Oh,
to get together, share stories, and support each other. And I applaud you
oh,
so
thank
much,
you.
both of you, for that.
We,
So
we,
thank you.
we cherish that in our lives. We
Yeah.
really do. It's what makes this house a home, all the different energy that comes in, and I'm very big on, and with second Sunday dinners, I'm very much, I want everyone to be engaged. And if I sense someone is not, I'm going to go out of my way to see if I can reel them in a bit. I used to do that with Tommy, our friend Tommy was not always very outspoken. And so if I sensed that, but then I knew the stories he loved to tell. And someone would say, "Oh, Tommy, my God, that time you got pulled over, you were dressed as a clown and your sister was in the car." And then, he's off.
Yeah.
But everyone should have a moment in the spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
We all deserve a moment in the spotlight.
Because normally you don't think anybody cares about what you have to say. I mean, I shouldn't say that about everybody. I feel that in a gathering like that, there are better storytellers than others, and sometimes I feel like, well, I'll just let them shine. That's fine, and I don't feel it necessary to be giving the next story. But I, like you, will notice when someone isn't talking, and which is fine. Like my daughter says, I'm happy being an introvert. I really don't need to be part of the conversation.
Right.
But at the same time, I've also heard her say, you know what, they never even asked how I was doing, in that particular conversation. So I think it's a really wonderful quality to have as a host. You and Terry are both hosts, that you open the door for someone to say, "Hey, yeah, here's my story about that." And it doesn't have to be a long story. It doesn't have to be a huge revealing story. It's just part of the conversation.
You
just want to be part of the conversation.
You want to be inclusive.
Yeah.
Because yes, you're right. Some people do tell stories better, but that doesn't mean that that's the only way you should be able to share your feelings. It's because you're a good storyteller.
Yeah.
And I'll give an example. Yesterday at our Thanksgiving dinner, we had some people who, they'll go on and on. And there was a brand new gentleman, and I just felt like, so I decided, I said, I'm going to suggest we play a game. I said, so I'm going to ask someone a question, and then that person will then find someone else going to ask a question about them. And that was just, all of a sudden I find out this guy worked for the Metropolitan Museum for 35 years.
Wow.
I said, well, what took you to New York? Oh, I was a swimmer, and all of a sudden we found out, but otherwise we would have never known. And then he in turn asks somebody else a question, and then that person,
Great.
And you can't ask a question back. So it was just a way of trying to engage this person who I thought was being left out.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I can understand why he was new to the group, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
But it's not a monologue.
No.
It's a dialogue.
That's right. Again.
Dialogue.
Yeah. So. And you're showing empathy, and that's huge. That's huge.
And what you learn is like, oh my God, what?
Yep.
All of a sudden you learn something that otherwise you wouldn't have known. And
that's right.
Really, really very revealing, because some people, you're right, it's easy for them.
Yeah. I had this young guy at work that said, he goes, and maybe in his early 20s, he said, "I really like what you're doing on your podcast because you're talking to real people." And I said, well, yeah, everybody's got their own stories. They're all real people. He goes, "Yeah, but you're not trying to get celebrities or stories we've all heard over and over again." And I said, "Well, that's absolutely not." But I said, "But I sure wouldn't mind talking to a celebrity." But it's like, yeah, there's so many stories that boggle the mind. He told me that he was so respectful and appreciative of his mother because she had been through such a lot and still took care of him, and he was able to get through college. So it just, again, opened that door where I said, "Oh, your mom did this," or it's fascinating. And I think it's sad sometimes when we don't know everybody's story, but until you ask the right questions, because you can sit in a group of friends and just chit chat about the weather forever, and it's hilarious and not so funny or whatever. But if you don't ask the right questions that reveal, like you said, that word, reveal a talent, a fear, a courageous act they did. They don't.
Yeah.
People mostly don't want to say, "Oh, by the way, let me tell you what I did the other day."
Yeah, well, some people do. We know those people, and we know it's not an issue. Oh, and it's not a negative thing, but it's not an
Yeah,
issue for them. But it is an issue for
yeah,
others. So I try, Terry and I try here to include everybody, to be inclusive.
yeah.
And the big
Very
thing for
important.
me is when I'm listening to someone, and I can always tell when someone is just dying to tell their version of the story. But when
Yeah,
someone finishes talking, I literally give myself like a 5 count or say, oh my God,
nice.
that's interesting. That's a great story. I didn't know that. As opposed to, oh, that happened to me too it's the most irritating.
One-upmanship.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is not
yeah.
that. When someone is finished, acknowledge it, let it sink in.
That's right.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, I understand we all have stories. I mean, trust me,
Yeah.
if I want to just keep going on a roll, I can. And sometimes I don't mind, and if it's appropriate, whatever. But for the most
Mm-hmm.
part, when I hear a story, I want to let the person telling the story know that I didn't just hear it, that I was listening, and
Yeah.
I'm going to let it sink in and let it there be, and then let's continue, let's move on. But
Uh-huh.
it's not a competition. And then somebody
Yeah.
recently told me, because I said that, I said it's not, and they said, oh no, everything's a competition. I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to live in your world. I really don't.
No.
Nah. I
Yeah.
think they were semi kidding, but
Sure.
I want I want the person talking to me to know that I heard them and I
Yeah.
acknowledged it. And vice versa, when I'm talking, I want the person to let me know they heard me.
Yes. Right.
There's
Right.
plenty of time. So
That is true. Okay. I want to thank my dear friend Paul Chapikian for chatting with me today, telling his life changing stories, his life crazy stories, his life life saving stories. It is all about surviving this wonderful life that we have and to find the gratitude of each one of those instances to help someone. That's an opportunity to help someone and to know your boundaries and to look around and be observant about what actually is going on and how safe it is. I'll keep that in mind, everyone. Paul is very good at that. So we're not saying go out and, you know, put yourself at risk into
no,
trying to help somebody. Know your limits. But I truly believe and agree with your lovely wife, Terry, that you do have a superpower. And to those that witness it, it's pretty amazing. And hearing about it, I love it. So thank you for sharing
it's
that
been
today.
my pleasure. Thank you for listening. Seriously,
Yeah,
this was wonderful. I didn't know what to expect, but
right,
here we
right.
are.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's always fun when you can, like you say, do a back and forth and a give and take. And that's what conversations are. And we find out a little bit about your family life and growing up. And again, it's a different dynamic, it's a unique dynamic. And I think fascinating all the time. Please join me next time when I speak with my beautiful and brave niece, who is also in law enforcement, Stephanie Willert. She has relatable stories in that part of her life, what inspired her to go into that line of work, and where she's at now and what she's pursuing. And there's a plethora of cousins that she has, and with the 12 children that I'm from, and have siblings of their children and their children's
Wow.
children. So the cousins and that family dynamic is something we're going to dive into a little bit. So until then, please take care of yourself. Take the time to listen to someone else. Open your heart every once in a while to just realize how amazing someone else's story is to listen to, and enjoy their company for what little time we have on this planet Earth. And please give your wife, Terry, a big hug for
I
me.
will do that. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Janice.
All right. Until next time, have a great day. Love you. Bye,
Love you
Paul.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye.